The story begins with our hero named Rubian reading his big brother's diary. He reads in his brother's diary that the father suddenly returned home with a younger brother named Rubian, which sparked the enthusiasm of the eldest son, who was overjoyed to become a big brother. But this joy soon dissipated when he discovered that his little brother was nothing but a little demon. He deliberately dropped a poor bell pepper on the floor, stepped on it, and then hid it under the table. And when the older brother tried to tell his father what happened, Rubian threatened him, but this did not scare Zebert, the brave boy from the Zebert family. Although the younger brother was very suspicious, the older brother decided to overlook the matter, for it is natural for an older brother to cover up his younger brother's mistakes. While the little brother was correcting the spelling errors his big brother made in his diary, reading how the big brother got his new sword, and how he would show it off to his older brother Liam when he returned, and that he would become a magnificent knight, his younger brother wondered if this matter was worth all this attention. The older brother wrote in his diary warning Rubian against snooping on his journal, although he wouldn't be able to read this warning because he would put a lock on it. He also mentioned that his mother would return tomorrow from her convalescence. Little Rubian appears and asks his brother to stop writing about him in his diary and to make the protection on it tighter. Then Rubian uses his magic to close the lock again before leaving, thinking to himself that his brother loves him a bit too much. The note mentioned that on one occasion, Rubian caused utter chaos in the entire house. It turned out that Rubian, the youngest in the family, was actually a girl. On a desolate battlefield filled with corpses and crows, a man appears holding his sword amidst the destruction. The man wonders if the sound of a breaking tree was what he heard, ruling out the presence of anyone alive in this place. Suddenly, he is surprised to find a small child right in front of him. The man looked at the child in shock, astonished by the presence of a child. Then he asked the child if he was from Eosia, and told him that he was from the Empire and would not hurt him. The man noticed that the child was looking for something to eat. The man reached out his hand to the child, asking him to come out of his hiding place, and told him that the war was over and the cleanup unit would arrive soon. The child asked the man if the war was truly over. The man answered in the affirmative. There had been a raging war for the past 10 years between humans and black beasts, and the man had been on the battlefield all that time. With the death of the dark wizard who started the war, the long conflict finally ended. The man held the child in his arms, apologizing for not coming sooner. Then he told him he should drink some water and eat something, but he was surprised by how light the child was. Suddenly the man moved, startling the child, so the child apologized for frightening him. The man wondered to himself why the child's eyes were so wide. The man asked the child if he had parents or brothers, or perhaps distant relatives. The child shook his head no, and when the man asked if he wanted to follow him, the child nodded in agreement. The man thought about the magnitude of suffering this child must have gone through after losing his family, to the point that he was willing to follow a stranger like him. The man decided to take the child with him, reassuring himself that as long as he wasn't from the Demon Kingdom, it was fine, as that is a closed nation one cannot even emigrate from without the king's permission. And while riding his horse with the child in his lap, he told him that when he returned to the Empire, he would find a place to shelter him. On a moonlit night, while the man and the child sat around a burning fire, the child began to feel that this place and this face seemed familiar to him. The man asked him gently if he still felt cold, but the way the man spoke stirred a strange feeling of anticipation in the child. The man suddenly asked him if he felt hot, and while the child was contemplating the crest engraved on the clothes the man gave him, the threads of truth began to become clear to the child. In a fleeting moment, the child realized the horrific truth with utter shock, and felt deep down that what he was seeing before him was the absolute truth. His suspicions were confirmed. This man sitting before him was the very person he had been desperately searching for. Here begins Rubian's true ordeal, as memories of his previous life returned to him in the midst of battle, discovering that he had reincarnated into the world of a novel he had previously read, titled The Sword Planted on the Ruins. The novel revolved around a grinding war between humans and black beasts. And since he was just an extra and marginal character in that story, he had tasted the bitterness of suffering. Rubian realized that the man sitting before him was none other than the legendary protagonist of the novel who led humanity to victory in that fierce war. While the man was offering him some cooked food, Rubian remembered his name, which he knew well, Leviathan Zebert. Leviathan, despite possessing no magical abilities, was the one who managed to kill the greatest dark wizard on the continent and end the war. And with this event, the first part of the original story ended. But the major problem Rubian remembered with shock is that Leviathan dies suddenly and mysteriously, shortly after. The existence of a second part to the novel meant that there was a massive number of upcoming incidents and battles, no less fierce than the first part. In the second part, the king of the Demon Kingdom revives the Dark Wizard, and with the absence of Leviathan, the only person capable of stopping him, the wizard wreaks havoc on the earth unchecked. Consequently, the entire continent turns into a battlefield once again, a catastrophic ending with which Rubian realized that a minor character like him would be nothing but collateral damage in this devastating conflict. In order to survive, he had to prevent the resurrection of the Dark Wizard himself. To achieve this goal, he looked at Leviathan with pleading eyes and asked him if he needed a younger member in his household, determined to turn this tragic war story into a peaceful slice-of-life story. But Leviathan's response came as a shock. shock, as he coldly rejected his request, saying he didn't need that, leaving Rubian in a state of astonishment. Rubian protested immediately, asking the reason for the refusal and insisting that Leviathan adopt him instead of taking him to the capital's orphanage as he promised. Leviathan sighed, warning the child that he would get dirty with dust if he continued rolling on the ground, then asked him curiously what he meant by being the youngest. Rubian froze in place, realizing he might have rushed the adoption idea too much just a few hours after their first meeting, but his heart was in a hurry. Both had suffered the ravages of war and were on the brink of death, and here they had finally met after all this suffering. However, the painful truth was that he didn't even remember how the person supposed to protect him dies. The reason for this was the sheer number of horrific events he went through in this life, which made him forget most details of the book he read in his previous life, except for the broad outlines of the story. He was actually a mage belonging to the Demon Kingdom, a child soldier forced into the heat of battle by direct orders from the Demon King. When the Allied nations heavily criticized the conscription of children, young mages like him were pulled to the rear lines. But even providing support from the rear in the middle of a battlefield meant being on the edge of death at every moment. After a full year of this harsh life, he finally realized that this world was nothing but the world of the novel he had read. So he decided to flee the demon army with only one goal: to meet Leviathan. Since the Demon Kingdom was a closed nation, the penalty for desertion was certain death, and while he was desperately evading his pursuers, he finally met Leviathan on that day. While he thought his only mission now was to find a way to save this man, he remembered another, more complex, problem. Leviathan hates mages intensely due to an incident that occurred 10 years ago. At that critical moment, Leviathan interrupted his thoughts, calling out to him, "Boy." The child felt a heavy burden weighing on his shoulders. The task of hiding his triple identity as a child soldier, a mage, and a deserter from the demon army, while simultaneously trying to prevent Leviathan's mysterious death, was a massive responsibility, which surprised Leviathan, who asked him why his mood suddenly changed. Leviathan thought the child was sullen because he refused to adopt him, so he poked his cheek. But the child, who was wondering internally how he ended up burdened with all these secrets, asked him to stop. Leviathan asked the child how a grown man could get angry at something like this. The child was surprised by that question. He asked him in astonishment what he meant by grown man. The child continued his internal dialogue, believing that regardless of being a fugitive and running from justice, he saw no need to change his gender as well, expressing his displeasure with this whole situation. The child told him that boys also sulk sometimes. Leviathan did not object to his words and urged him to sleep because they had a long road ahead tomorrow. As they set off on their journey, Leviathan noticed that the child talked a lot and chattered all day long. Despite that, he found his talk pleasant and not boring. In fact, he felt lonely when silence fell between them. Meanwhile, a monster appeared before them. So Leviathan quickly covered the child's eyes and ordered him not to look. Leviathan rode his horse with the child in his lap and set off fighting the black beasts that were abundant in that area due to its proximity to the border. After the battle ended, Leviathan asked the child, whose face was stained with the beast's blood, if he had felt scared, assuring him that everything was fine now. But the child burst into screams, not out of fear of the monster, but in panic over the mess and blood that stained his only clothes, wondering how the greatest swordsman on the continent could be this messy. Leviathan was surprised by the child's reaction and asked him if that was really the problem, then apologized to him, while the child continued to complain about the foul smell that wouldn't go away easily. Leviathan took out a water skin and began gently cleaning the child's face, asking him again if he was truly okay and not afraid, but the child groaned in pain from the vigorous scrubbing. At that moment, all the child could think about was that he wouldn't be able to get the moonflower herb, which was perfect for removing the blood of black beasts. Leviathan noticed the child's strange calmness and asked him why he wasn't crying, pointing out that he hadn't shed a single tear since they met. The child felt bad and wondered anxiously if he looked like an abnormal child because he didn't cry. He knew from the events of the original novel that Leviathan possessed a strong and terrifying aura due to the years he spent on battlefields, to the point that children would burst into tears just seeing him. So he decided to justify his stance, saying that he really felt scared, but crying changes nothing, confirming that this was not a lie. In his previous and current life, he didn't cry much, because he learned that trying to solve the problem is better than shedding tears over it. Quietly, he added that whenever he cried, all he heard was that he was annoying. Leviathan was moved by his words and asked him who told him that crying changes nothing. The child became confused and answered spontaneously that his mother was the one who told him that. He quickly realized his mistake, as he is an orphan in this life, so he apologized in his heart to mothers who never existed. Leviathan held the child's face with both hands suddenly, which surprised him. Then he told him tenderly that if he continued to suppress his feelings, it would turn into an illness. Leviathan noticed blood on the child's head and said he must bandage it for him. On their way to the capital, they exchanged conversation on many matters, from trivial talk to innocent joking. They talked about what they liked and disliked, and these small conversations filled their journey and made it brighter. On one occasion, the child asked if there were more monsters, and Leviathan answered that they had all died. The child looked at Leviathan with great admiration and told him he was truly strong. The child reflected on the immense sacrifices Leviathan had made over 10 full years to achieve this peace, comparing it to only 2 years he himself had spent on the battlefield, which were in themselves harsh and hard to endure. He looked at Leviathan with deep gratitude and thanked him for saving him, which surprised the man who didn't expect this sudden expression. The child held Leviathan's large hand and thanked him again for his hard work on the battlefield, expressing his realization of how difficult it must have been for him. With an innocent smile, he told him that, thanks to him, the world had become a place where peace prevails. After paving the way with words of thanks and appreciation, he moved to his real goal, suggesting that since Leviathan had already saved him, why not take him as his youngest son and raise him? But contrary to what he hoped, he found himself in front of the gate of the royal orphanage where Leviathan left him and departed. The child collapsed crying, imagining how the world would end if this old man left him alone. The director welcomed him kindly and offered him some food first, realizing he must be hungry. She presented him with a plate of pasta prepared by the chef especially for him, asking if the dish didn't look cute. But the child, who was starving, wondered to himself if this woman was mocking him with this childish food. At that moment, a man came to tell the director that there was a matter needing verification, so she excused herself immediately, leaving the child to finish his food. The child looked at his plate in horror. The pasta was decorated with small human shapes that looked like they were suffering under giant meatballs. So he felt it was doomsday pasta, and a bad omen of his failure to stop the end of the world. The child was furious at the thought that Leviathan left him behind as soon as they reached the capital, so he slammed his fists on the table, drawing the attention of the other children. From the intensity of his anger, he felt sudden dizziness, wondering if he had overreacted as a small child whose simple request was not granted. But soon he realized that the dizziness wasn't just from anger. The capital Pamlone was almost void of magic, and merely existing there was exhausting for a mage like him, so he fell with his head on the table from fatigue. While he felt he was in his worst state, physically due to lack of magic and emotionally due to Leviathan abandoning him, someone approached and asked if he was okay. The inquirer was another boy from the orphanage, blonde with blue eyes. He noticed the child's pale face and asked if he was sick. The child lifted his head and was surprised by the handsomeness of the boy in front of him. The child denied being sick and told him he had many things on his mind. The handsome boy, wanting to play the hero, offered to listen to him as it might help. The child began to explain his complex plan to himself, clarifying that they must first prevent the world from ending. To achieve this, they must save the main hero of the story, Leviathan, who was on the verge of death. He explained that he tried to hide the truth of being a fugitive mage to save him so he wouldn't die, but feelings of betrayal returned to him, remembering how that man coldly abandoned him, and realized he needed a new plan. Therefore, his priority was to see him again because he couldn't accept the idea of the hero dying because of him. While the child was muttering all these complex thoughts, the blonde boy was struggling to understand what was going on in his mind. The boy smiled gently, wondering what kind of worries could trouble a small child like this. The child simply told the boy that he would take his childish fears seriously and patted his head affectionately. At that moment, the director returned and noticed the child had finished his food, so she told him it was now time to measure his magical power. The child felt panic as the director explained. There was a fugitive mage on the loose, and thus conducting magic measurements was mandatory. The child realized his cover was blown and he was doomed. Elsewhere, Leviathan was meeting a man in a beautiful place inside the royal palace. But Leviathan interrupted his talk about the beauty of the place and asked him to get straight to the point. The man smiled. He was none other than Dietrian Pamlone, emperor of the Pamlone Empire, and described Leviathan as grim as usual. Then the emperor revealed the reason for summoning him, explaining that the Magic Kingdom had requested their cooperation in tracking a fugitive mage, and that a squad of mages passing through the Kennelin Pass had been completely wiped out. The emperor told Leviathan that there was only one body missing from the mage squad that was wiped out. Leviathan coldly assumed the missing body likely fell off the cliff, asking sarcastically if he had to deal with this kind of cleanup too, a response the emperor had indeed expected. The emperor ignored Leviathan's sarcasm and asked him to dampen his ominous aura, which nearly caused all his servants to faint. Despite understanding Leviathan's desire not to get involved in the Magic Kingdom's affairs, the emperor considered him too harsh and reminded him of the old fugitive mage incident, which provoked Leviathan, who interrupted him sternly. Leviathan understood the implied message, released a terrifying black aura, and said that was all he needed to hear. The servants trembled in fear of Leviathan's aura, so the emperor reassured them and dismissed them. Then the emperor agreed to handle this case himself, which sparked Leviathan's gratitude for his understanding. The emperor commented with a sarcastic smile on Leviathan's rudeness. Then the emperor changed the subject, noting that he heard Marquis Afrique saw something interesting while entering the palace. He revealed he knew Leviathan was accompanied by a small child and asked him jokingly if he was thinking of adopting again. The emperor advised him against it, explaining that the north is not a good place to raise a child, and although his own two sons adapted well, there is no guarantee this child would do the same. He concluded it was best for the child's interest to leave him in the capital, which Leviathan reluctantly agreed to. Leviathan was convinced by the emperor's words, realizing that the north is still a land where monsters appear from time to time, a place where even adults struggle to survive, and that life there would be much harsher for a small child like Rubian. He reached a painful decision that he couldn't take the child to the north just to fulfill his personal desires, and decided to pass by the orphanage to bid him farewell before leaving. But while walking in the streets of the capital, he coincidentally heard disturbing talk about a thief breaking into the royal orphanage. His fears were confirmed when he heard that children were injured in the incident. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the orphanage, Rubian was facing a thief. The child was cursing this magic-poor country in his heart, feeling extreme exhaustion just from using a little magic. His plan was to sneak out of the bathroom and escape before his magical power was measured, and they discovered he was a mage. But he encountered the thief on his way. Without thinking, he used his magic to catch him. Luckily, no one was around to see what happened. Rubian felt he was on the verge of collapse and realized he must get out of there quickly and find Leviathan to explain the situation. The child ran in the rainy alleys, but he started hearing people shouting about a thief, and a child collapsed here, so doubts began to creep into his heart. He asked himself fearfully, what if he rejected me again? Due to his physical fatigue, dark thoughts began to dominate him, and he wondered to himself if no one needed him, but he quickly shook these gloomy thoughts from his head and decided to move forward. However, his exhausted body betrayed him, so he decided to rest a little before continuing his way, then fell to the ground. In the temporary barracks of the Zebert Knights in the capital, Sir Leon stood in the rain and someone asked him about the child's condition. Leon reassured him that the child was fine, and that he only collapsed due to lack of stamina and would wake up soon. The other man breathed a sigh of relief while Leon commented on how panicked he had been earlier. Leon couldn't believe that His Highness, Leviathan, had lost his temper like that just because a child went missing. In a flash, he remembered the strict order Leviathan issued to his knights to search for Rubian, describing him as a boy with silver hair and blue eyes. Knight Leon couldn't believe what he was seeing. His master, Leviathan, was in a state of extreme turmoil over a mere child from an orphanage, whom he finally found collapsed in a rainy alley and hugged tightly. Orders were immediately issued to prepare a carriage suitable for a child for the return journey to the Zebert lands. The child Rubian woke up suddenly, feeling confused and lost, wondering where he was. But Leviathan's voice calling his name brought him back to reality. Rubian was surprised to see the man he was looking for. Leviathan reassured him and told him they were in his private barracks and he should rest. He explained that he collapsed due to extreme exhaustion and needed to eat, take medicine, and rest, promising to bring him clean clothes to change into. Rubian felt panicked at the idea of changing his clothes, but he quickly breathed a sigh of relief when he realized they had only removed his outer clothes and his secret was still safe. Leviathan gently touched Rubian's forehead, noticing with relief that his fever had gone down significantly. Overjoyed, Rubian held Leviathan's hand and asked eagerly if he had been looking for him. Leviathan confirmed it, recounting how he rushed to the orphanage as soon as he heard the news of the theft, and how shocked he was to discover Rubian was missing. With a tender tone, he called him a troublemaker, whom he couldn't let out of his sight for even a moment. Rubian cleverly seized this opportunity, arguing that the only solution was for Leviathan to keep him by his side permanently. As if to seal the deal, Leviathan handed him a spoonful of soup, admitting he was planning to do so anyway. Rubian was stunned by this sudden turn of events and asked if he really meant what he said. Leviathan simply told him he should chew his food well. Rubian persisted in asking why he changed his mind after being strongly opposed to the idea. Leviathan explained that his initial hesitation stemmed from his desire for Rubian to live a safe and peaceful life after the war had finally ended. He had wished for him a normal life, away from the cold of the north and its monsters. But Rubian declared passionately that he felt no peace unless he was beside Leviathan, and that he was ready to face any difficulties as long as they were together. Leviathan was moved by his words, smiled, and surrendered, saying he no longer had any other choice. He promised him that once his fever went down completely, they would head north together. Before setting off, Leviathan insisted on checking Rubian's health, examining him for any remaining symptoms. But Rubian, who had run out of patience, assured him he was perfectly healthy. Leviathan laughed at his enthusiasm and agreed to move forward, taking him to file the guardianship application officially. In an official's office, documents were presented stating that Lord Zebert would guarantee Rubian's status and provide him with protection and support until he reached the age of majority. Rubian thought this arrangement might be better than adoption. It was a cleaner solution for him because he planned to leave once his goals were achieved. The idea of guardianship reminded him of his previous life in the orphanage and his feeling of being lost when he had to become independent at 17. He resolved to be better prepared this time. When it was time to sign, Rubian took the pen enthusiastically and signed himself. Leviathan teased him about his handwriting resembling worms, so Rubian defended his handwriting angrily, saying it was the imperial language, which made Leviathan laugh and apologize. The official wished them happiness, and it seemed a peaceful future awaited them. While Leviathan carried Rubian in his arms, he reminded him that the choice was ultimately his. He explained that he didn't adopt him immediately because the North is an extremely harsh place, and he wanted him to experience it himself before deciding if he could live there. But Rubian insisted he would stay by his side regardless of the nature of the North. Leviathan teased him, saying he wasn't a baby bird that had imprinted on him, so Rubian laughed happily. Then Leviathan told him that although he didn't understand the reason for his strong attachment to him, from that day on, Rubian became the youngest member of their family. Upon their arrival at the Zebert Duchy lands in the north, the Duke, Leviathan's father, asked if his son had brought something with him. When he learned he brought a child, the Duke was displeased, considering his son's action pure nonsense. The butler wondered anxiously what they should do about this situation. The Duke decided that they must first test if the child was qualified to live in the north. On their way, Rubian suffered from severe motion sickness and vomited everything he ate, which caused him extreme embarrassment. So Leviathan rushed to comfort him. He helped him rinse his mouth with some water. Rubian felt terribly ashamed, wondering if his body had become weaker. Leviathan decided the solution was for Rubian to ride with him on the horse, even if it was uncomfortable. At that moment, Sir Leon appeared, interrupting their conversation. Rubian recognized him immediately. He was Leviathan's loyal butler in the original story. But he noticed from Leon's stern look that this loyal servant didn't seem impressed by him at all. Leon intervened, suggesting the child ride with him. He explained that the fresh air would help alleviate motion sickness, and more importantly, it would allow their master to get some rest. Leon revealed that Leviathan had barely slept the entire way to the north, which shocked Rubian. Rubian realized with a deep sense of guilt that this was all because of him. Because he was sick and shy around others, Leviathan had to care for him personally throughout the journey. Leviathan tried to downplay the matter, assuring that Leon was exaggerating and he wasn't tired. But Leon insisted that any night would collapse if he slept only 2 or 3 hours for several consecutive days, prompting Leviathan to scold him. Although Leviathan scolded Leon so as not to scare the child, Rubian realized that what the knight said was the truth. With sudden insistence, Rubian grabbed Leon's cloak and declared he would go with him. He ordered Leviathan to go to the carriage and sleep. Leviathan tried to refuse, smiling at the child's determination. But Rubian ignored him and asked Sir Leon to hurry and put him on the horse. Then he announced he refused Leviathan's refusal and insisted again that his master go back and get some rest. So Leon had no choice but to lift him onto the horse. Through the carriage window, Rubian watched Leviathan sleeping with a satisfied smile. While they were riding, Leon scolded Rubian for his disrespectful way of speaking to his master, questioning his persistence. Rubian replied that his master didn't object, then asked Leon in turn why he decided to follow Leviathan in the first place. Sir Leon began interrogating Rubian, to which Rubian replied that he follows Leviathan simply because he is the person who saved him. Leon warned him seriously that if he hoped for a comfortable life in a duke's household, he should give up that idea, explaining that the Zebert lands were established on territory conquered after being owned by magical beasts. He added that these displaced beasts constantly try to reclaim their lands, making the North a war zone year-round. Leon ended his harsh warning, confirming that this place is not the paradise he imagines, making Rubian grumble to himself about being scolded so much. Leon's words made Rubian think deeply, realizing now how dangerous Leviathan's home was, and how he had spent his entire life fighting monsters. He felt deep sadness for his master's fate, who spent 10 years on the battlefield, only to die in the end after all this bitter fighting. But he quickly shook off these gloomy thoughts, slapped his face gently to wake himself up, and resolved not to give in to depression and to do his best upon their arrival. Suddenly, Rubian noticed Sir Leon was shivering, so he called him anxiously. The convoy stopped, and Leviathan appeared to find Leon wounded on the ground. He had been hiding the fact that his injury hadn't fully healed. Leviathan immediately ordered a camp to be set up for rest, ignoring Leon's protests about delaying the schedule. Leviathan scolded him severely for hiding his injury, considering it a clear violation of military orders. Leon justified his action, saying he didn't want to cause trouble for the entire unit because of him. Rubian approached the wounded Leon and told him gently that with the war completely over, there was no longer any need to rush and endure pain. He reminded him they were on their way home, not to another battle, which touched Leon, who felt some embarrassment. Leon admitted the war was indeed over, and they were the ones who ended it with their own hands. While Leviathan was bandaging his wound, Leviathan intervened, emphasizing that to ensure their sacrifices weren't in vain and they survived, they must return home in good health. Leon was encouraged by their words and announced enthusiastically that he would recover quickly. So Leviathan teased him, saying the strength of his voice was proof enough he would heal, while Rubian smiled happily at the knight's improvement. But this touching moment was interrupted by Rubian, who could no longer stand the foul smell of the ointment used to treat Leon. He wondered to himself about the source of the smell, disapproving of their use of such old ointment. Leviathan tried to calm him, reminding him that a future knight must be able to endure such things at least. But Rubian walked away using the excuse that it smelled terrible. That night, in Leviathan's tent, Rubian decided to make an improved ointment himself, utilizing his advanced knowledge of the Witch Kingdom's medicine. Rubian took advantage of Leviathan's absence in a meeting and began preparing his secret recipe. He chopped abuelita herbs he gathered nearby, added several neutral agents he stole from the kitchen, and mixed the ingredients well. With a slight modification, he managed to make a special ointment that was odorless and worked better, noting it would have been more effective if he had added some magical power to it. Just as he was about to finish making the ointment, he heard a strange voice saying, "Found you," which panicked him. Rubian turned around in shock, disbelieving what he heard, and whispered the name, "Khalid?" A young man with dark blue hair appeared, using magic to communicate with Rubian remotely, and greeted him respectfully, saying, "Hello, Master." Rubian immediately remembered his first meeting with Khalid in the midst of a fierce battle. He had found him by chance as a child trapped inside a cave, and since he couldn't leave him, he saved him. From that moment, Khalid called Rubian Master and swore eternal loyalty to him. Warlock's magic intertwined like ropes once they exchanged vows, allowing them direct communication and even feeling each other's life or death. Khalid expressed his deep concern, explaining he couldn't communicate with Rubian after he disappeared suddenly and his magic was sealed. Rubian apologized immediately, justifying his quick escape by saying he was obsessed with the idea of finding Leviathan. Khalid asked him if he was in Babel now, causing Rubian's astonishment as he wondered how he knew his location. Khalid teased him, saying his surprise was cute. Khalid continued his strange talk about imagining a wolf folding its ears, while Rubian denounced this nonsense. Then Khalid told him he would reach him soon and asked him to wait. Before Rubian could inquire about his location or stop him from coming, Khalid cut the magical connection suddenly. Rubian was furious, vowing that Khalid would regret his action when he arrived. The next day, Rubian presented Sir Leon with a small gift. It was an improved ointment to which he added some aromatic herbs because the original ointment smelled terrible. Leon was surprised by the gift, thanked Rubian for it, then apologized for his harsh words earlier. He asked Rubian to call him Senior instead of Sir from now on, which confused Rubian. Leviathan appeared suddenly and asked Leon why he allowed such a title, justifying it by saying it was appropriate for Rubian to become a member of the Night Squad, since he would be staying at the Zebert estate. Rubian was shocked by the idea of joining the Zebert Knights, imagining himself amidst a festival of muscles. He protested internally, saying he was a mage, not a knight. Leviathan noticed Leon was impressed by Rubian, then asked him to show him the gift as well. Rubian gave him the ointment, so Leviathan wondered curiously how he knew this preparation method, explaining that merely mixing ingredients doesn't improve the smell. Rubian became confused and lied, claiming his mother was a healer in Eosia, and he learned from her by watching. This claim astonished both Leviathan and Leon. It was amazing he could learn all this just by watching, and even distinguish wild herbs too. The two men commented jokingly that he might be a genius, which annoyed Rubian, who asked them to stop teasing him. Rubian demanded Leviathan return his ointment, confirming he made enough for everyone, to which Leviathan responded with a smile. The improved ointment received wide acclaim among the Night Squad. In appreciation of Rubian's efforts, the Knights managed to arrange a large carriage with wide windows, putting an end to his suffering with motion sickness, and they finally arrived at their destination. Rubian was dazzled by the majestic entrance of the Zebber Duchy, but he soon felt extreme cold, describing the place as hell, which angered Leviathan, who reminded him this was his land and kingdom. The duchy was indeed a harsh place, with its barren mountains, dark passes where the screams of beasts echoed, and arid lands where snow piled high in winter. Leviathan asked Rubian if he still didn't regret coming here after seeing the harshness of the place himself. Rubian answered defiantly that he didn't regret it at all, and trying to scare him wouldn't work. Leviathan smiled with relief, while the knights burst into laughter, confusing Rubian. Then Leviathan pointed to a great castle looming on the horizon and said that what he saw there was Zebert Castle. The Zebert family tree residing in the main castle is reviewed, consisting of Balrog Zebert, Leviathan Zebert, Rosetta Zebert, as well as Boyd and Liam Zebert. It is mentioned that Balrog Zebert is the former Duke and Leviathan's father, who retired from the battlefield after his injury, spending the remainder of his life quietly inside the castle, and rarely appeared in the events of the original story. Meanwhile, it turns out the Duchess and the eldest son are currently absent, residing in the southern lands. As a result, only the former Duke Balrog and the second son Boyd Zebert remain in the castle, while the servants and retainers welcome them warmly upon their return home. Rubian appears holding on to Leviathan's cloak, while it is indicated that these servants are retainers who swore loyalty to the Zebert family over generations. He thinks to himself, wondering at the vitality they possess. Surmising the reason is spending their entire lives in this rugged land. It seems all northerners are characterized by toughness and strong builds, as the men appear remarkably tall. In another scene, Lord Leviathan praises the head butler, Adolf, and his men for their good work and enduring much hardship. So Adolf asks him in return about the identity of the small child accompanying him. Leviathan places his hand on the child's head and introduces him, saying this is Rubian, whom he mentioned in his letters. The servants stare at the small child with glowing eyes, a look that stirred awe in him. Rubian felt scared, wondering to himself if these servants were carnivores and he was their prey, while the servants were thinking about how small and cute he was. and that he was much smaller than Master Boyd when he first arrived. Rubian decided not to show his fear and to greet them properly, so he gathered his courage and spoke. With a shy voice, he introduced himself as Rubian and told them he would be living with them from now on, expressing his hope for their kindness, while Leviathan was teasing him, saying he was wringing his cloak as if it were a towel. The child's innocence impressed the servants, who found him extremely cute. Leviathan held Rubian in his arms and asked him why he stiffened up, suspecting he felt shy around strangers. Meanwhile, Rubian got emotional and made an excuse, saying he was capable of being gentle too, while Leviathan noticed the child had begun to open up and talk. Rubian insisted he was already 8 years old and deserved some respect, but Leviathan teased him, saying one shouldn't lie in their first meeting, which annoyed Rubian. Rubian was angry in his heart because he was telling the truth. In fact, he had subtracted 2 years from his true age of 10. The maids were wondering in astonishment if he was really 8 years old and not 6, marveling that it could be possible with that small frame, while Rubian wondered why they were surprised. Leviathan held on to Rubian, who was trying to escape, and warned everyone jokingly to be careful because he might bite, while Rubian was screaming, asking him to put him down. Amidst this chaos, another boy appeared screaming, calling Leviathan Dad, in a sudden and dramatic way from above. The boy who fell got up with great enthusiasm, welcoming their return after a long time. Rubian realized immediately that this boy who arrived was the second son, Boyd Zebert. One of the maids confirmed that this child was indeed the second son, Boyd Zebert. Boyd apologized to his father, Leviathan, for his excessive enthusiasm and recklessness, but the father smiled tenderly and told him he had grown a lot already. Boyd asked Leviathan about the Capitol and the victory parade, and added enthusiastically that he never missed sword training, never missed a meal, and studied hard too. Leviathan praised his efforts, so Boyd thanked him, then turned towards the small child. Boyd asked his father if this was the child who would live with him from now on, so Rubian turned and replied quietly, "Hello?" while thinking to himself that Boyd was braver than he expected. It is revealed that Boyd, who hails from a distant branch of the family, lost his parents in the war at a young age. Consequently, he was adopted to become the second son of the Zebert couple, and despite his dark past, he grew up as a bright and cheerful boy who knew no trouble. Boyd looked at Rubian admiringly, commenting that he was even better than he imagined. Then Rubian introduced himself. With all enthusiasm, Boyd introduced himself, saying his name is Boyd, and he is 11 years old. Then Boyd asked Rubian about his age, to which he replied he was 8. So Boyd felt overjoyed because he finally found someone younger than him. Rubian was puzzled by Boyd's words, which sounded as if he considered him inferior. But Boyd actually meant to welcome him warmly into the Zebert family as his younger brother. Boyd spun around Rubian playfully, commenting on how small he was, and that he felt light enough to be carried easily, prompting Rubian to protest that he wasn't that small, while Leviathan watched the situation quietly. In the meantime, Leviathan was informed that the old master, his grandfather, could not attend due to his health condition, so he decided to introduce Rubian to him at a later time. Boyd asked his father enthusiastically if he was going to the office and if he could accompany him, all while gently pinching Rubian's cheeks. Leviathan agreed to his request. Overjoyed, Boyd thanked his father, then picked Rubian up and dashed off, but Leviathan told him to put his brother down first. Boyd took off, promising to bring the exam papers on which he had scored full marks and his sword training logs, and that he would play with his little brother later, while one of the servants commented that the young master had never actually received a full mark. The butler remarked that Boyd was now capable of being apart from his master on his own, to which Leviathan replied that this was natural, as they were father and son. It was revealed that the reason for their distance in the past was due to Leviathan's imposing presence and frightening appearance, which used to make little Boyd cry whenever he saw him. To avoid scaring him, Leviathan had avoided him in turn, leading to them rarely speaking. Although things had improved greatly now, Rubian, having understood the situation, commented that he thought his uncle's face was indeed a little scary, which caught Leviathan's attention, so he asked him what he had said. Leviathan approached him, teasing Rubian that he was acting bold enough to call him scary, so Rubian tried to dodge him, asking him not to hit him, while Leviathan thought to himself that Rubian resembled a wild beast. The butler interrupted this playful moment to inform Leviathan that someone wished to be introduced to Lord Rubian. This person was Hazel, the personal maid who would be in Rubian's service, and she welcomed him warmly. Hazel suggested that Rubian take a bath first, as he must be tired from the long journey, and offered to serve him. Rubian was very enthusiastic about the idea, as he was truly longing for a bath. But his enthusiasm quickly turned to anxiety as he remembered that if Hazel helped him bathe, she would discover his hidden secret. Leviathan noticed Rubian's blushing face and asked him with concern what was wrong and if he was feeling sick again. Rubian denied it and motioned for Leviathan to come closer. Rubian whispered in Leviathan's ear, claiming he had a large scar on his body that he didn't like people to see, then asked if he could bathe alone. Leviathan wondered worriedly about the severity of the wound, then issued a clear order to Hazel that her presence during the bath would only be with Rubian's consent, and that he must not be forced to do so under any circumstances. After that, Hazel asked Rubian gently if they should go together, and he agreed enthusiastically. As they were leaving, the butler thought in amazement that he had never seen a child speak so spontaneously with the master of the house before, and that everyone was surprised. Then, sudden horror gripped him at the thought of a large scar on a small child's body, wondering who in the world could do such a thing. In the bathroom, Rubian looked at himself in the mirror, wondering about the source of the scar, speculating that he might have gotten it on a battlefield. But he quickly revealed the real problem, a magic seal on his back, which, if seen, would immediately identify him as a runaway mage. Fortunately for him, this land, which was once a monster territory, was rich in mana, unlike the capital, giving him a chance. Rubian decided to take advantage of the fact that no one was around and began using magic. He realized that his own mana was not enough to keep the seal hidden forever, so he decided to use the surrounding mana, creating a magic circle where his own mana resonated with the external mana to compensate for the shortage and cast the spell. After successfully completing the spell, Rubian examined himself to find that his eyes had returned to their original color. He looked at his back in the mirror to confirm with relief that the seal had completely disappeared and was no longer visible at all. Rubian felt proud and satisfied with his successful use of magic after such a long time, reminding himself that he was a genius mage. After finishing his bath, the maids noticed that he had enjoyed his time because he stayed in the bathroom for a long while. Rubian told them he felt relieved because warm water was the best thing in the cold north. One of the maids noticed that the clothes she had prepared for him were too big, explaining that they were the size of the other young masters when they were children, and that he would need new clothes, which made Rubian blush. But Rubian insisted he was fine and could simply fold the clothes, impressing the maids who found him extremely cute. However, the maid insisted that children should wear clothes that fit them perfectly so they wouldn't trip, which Rubian reluctantly agreed to. And then she suggested they have dinner. The maid told him that the head chef had carefully prepared a wonderful meal for him, and that the master of the house would not be joining them, so he would be dining only with young Master Boyd. Rubian realized that the opportunity to have a one-on-one meal with Boyd had come sooner than expected, and that Boyd was his first target in order to successfully settle in this place. Rubian believed that winning Boyd's favor would be easy, as he was a naturally cheerful boy and easy to deal with, which was why he thought he would succeed in getting close to him easily. However, while they were at the luxurious dinner table, Boyd began acting like an overly responsible big brother, declaring that his little brother really needed a lot of care. He then offered to cut his food for him on the pretext that it was too big, and although Rubian insisted he could do it himself, Boyd persisted. Boyd cut the food and served it to Rubian, thinking that being a big brother was truly exhausting, while the maids watched the scene with warm smiles. Rubian found himself surrendering to this attention, admitting to himself that he hadn't even started trying to win Boyd's favor, yet he had already been won over, and that this feeling was comfortable and nice. Boyd continued to feel responsible, believing he had to take care of his little brother at every meal. Rubian broke the silence with an innocent question about why they were eating alone and where Uncle Leviathan was, causing Boyd to stop eating for a moment. Boyd explained that his father was usually busy and didn't eat with them. Rubian was surprised by this. He had expected Boyd to feel disappointed because of it, but he noticed that Boyd seemed completely accustomed to eating alone, making Rubian think sadly that Boyd was still too young to endure the feeling of loneliness. After this thought, Rubian decided it was time to bring out that thing he was hiding. He took out a small card, explaining that he had bought something similar in the capital. He then presented it as a gift to his brother, leaving Boyd completely stunned. Boyd exploded with joy. The gift was the Hero Card Collection Limited Capital Edition, an extremely rare item. Boyd asked his brother repeatedly if he was sure about giving him this precious gift, and when Rubian confirmed it was his, Boyd enthusiastically declared that Rubian was the best brother ever. Rubian chuckled inwardly, confirming to himself that playing cards were the best way to handle children. He recalled how he had boldly asked Leviathan for money in the capital market to buy the card, and how he had corrected a vendor who called him Little Lady. He also remembered how Leviathan had underestimated the value of the card, wondering why he wanted something so cheap. This had prompted both Rubian and the vendor to enthusiastically defend the Hero Card Collection, which was wildly popular among children across the continent. Rubian remembered from the original story that Boyd desperately wanted this card but couldn't get it because it was exclusive to the capital. So Rubian had bought it as a potential bribe in case Boyd was wary of him. Rubian felt satisfied. Although he used the gift differently than he had expected, Boyd loved it, and that was what mattered. More importantly, he saw that Boyd looked much better when he smiled. While Boyd was examining his gift, he happily discovered that his father was also in the card collection. With great enthusiasm, Boyd suggested they play cards together after dinner. but Rubian rejected his request immediately and firmly. Rubian woke up the next morning feeling refreshed after a deep and restful sleep, but he was surprised to find Leviathan in his room, who greeted him, commenting that he seemed to have slept well. Rubian asked him in surprise why he was in his room, but Leviathan ignored the question and told him to put on his slippers because the floor was cold. Rubian insisted on knowing why he was there, but Leviathan patted his head and told him he looked fine, then left, saying he was going and that Rubian should have a good breakfast. Rubian quickly ran after him, asking where he was going and why he wasn't eating with them, then added anxiously if the reason was that he didn't want to eat with Boyd. Leviathan denied this strongly, emphasizing that he had a lot of work at the moment. Rubian pretended not to care. Leviathan promised him that they would eat together once things settled down, then bade him farewell and told him to come to him if anything happened. After Rubian left, Leviathan sighed in relief. He had been worried about Rubian on his first day in an unfamiliar house, but he seemed fine last night. Leviathan knew that Rubian hadn't been able to sleep properly during the entire journey back from the capital. The sight of the small child tossing, turning, and sweating had evoked pity even in the hardened nights. Rubian had been muttering words like, "Don't go that way," and "I'll stop him," without realizing he was having a nightmare. And since he seemed bright and cheerful when awake, no one could ask him about his nightmares. Leviathan wondered if Rubian's nightmares were related to the attack on his village. From his sleep-talking, he sounded like a soldier who had witnessed the horrors of battle. The butler, Adolf, interrupted his thoughts, asking in surprise why he was so deep in thought that he hadn't noticed his arrival. Leviathan replied that it was nothing, and that his intense busyness had perhaps made him think of silly things for a moment. Leviathan admitted to himself that he knew nothing about Rubian, nor even how to deal with his own son Boyd properly, making him a pathetic father, and wished his wife Rose were present at a time like this. Adolf asked what he needed, and he told him that Lady Rosetta had sent a letter. Leviathan explained that he had asked her in a letter if he could bring Rubian, and that her reply had arrived just in time. So Adolf asked curiously what she said. Leviathan opened the letter. It seemed his wife was very curious, so much so that he felt as if she was planning to come and interrogate him herself rather than just sending a letter. Adolf commented that this made sense, as this was the first child Leviathan had brought personally. Then Leviathan asked when Rose would return. Adolf told him she said it would take about a month. In an additional note in the letter, Rose asked if the child wasn't a girl, right? Meanwhile, Boyd was overjoyed with his father's limited capital edition hero card. He decided to go play with Rubian, but he was surprised when he entered the room and found a group of maids surrounding Rubian. Boyd shouted at them angrily, asking what they were doing. The maids were surprised by his reaction. Boyd accused them of bullying his brother, but they denied it strongly, explaining that they were only trying to groom Master Rubian's hair, but Boyd didn't believe them and called them liars. He then hugged Rubian, who looked terrified, pointing out how scared he was. While one of the maids wondered anxiously to herself about Master Rubian's condition, Leviathan interrupted the chaos, asking about the cause of the commotion. So Boyd rushed to him to tell him that the servants must be scolded for what they did to Rubian. Rubian tried to defuse the situation, assuring Leviathan that he was perfectly fine. But Boyd insisted that his brother was not fine, but was trembling with fear at the scissors the maids were holding. Leviathan intervened firmly, ordering the maid Hazel to put the scissors away immediately, and the maid bowed, apologizing profusely to little Master Rubian. Hazel was overcome with guilt, admitting through tears that she was so preoccupied with his appearance that she hadn't noticed his trembling fear, and declared she was ready to pay for this negligence with her life. Rubian was panicked by her words and pleaded with her not to say that, justifying that he himself didn't know he was afraid of scissors, so how could she know, and asked her to stand up, assuring her he was fine. Leviathan regained control of the situation, asking everyone to calm down, then praised Boyd for his concern for his brother and returned his card to him. Boyd accepted it proudly, declaring he was his big brother. When Leviathan turned his sharp gaze toward the rest of the servants, Rubian intervened, begging him not to be angry with them. For Rubian's sake, Leviathan decided to forgive them this time, but warned them sternly that there would be no second chance, which the servants understood completely. Then Leviathan turned to Rubian gently, telling him there was no need to cut his hair until he was ready, and that he shouldn't be forced to do something he hated. He assured him that even he himself didn't have the right to force him to do so. When he asked if anything else was bothering him, Rubian claimed his bangs were hurting his eyes, and he would like a hairpin. So one of the maids enthusiastically announced she would go buy one immediately. Leviathan stopped her, ordering the maids to look for something suitable for Rubian in the East Room. He told them to get the key from the butler Adolf. Then they picked up Rubian and left. While Rubian was in the maid's arms, he wondered to himself what could be in that room. Boyd noticed that Rubian's face looked pale, but Rubian reassured him and thanked him for his help, which relieved Boyd. Then Leviathan reminded Boyd that it was time for fencing practice, which surprised the boy. So Boyd dashed off toward his training. Leviathan wondered why Boyd ran away just from a question, to which Rubian replied cheerfully that the reason might be his scary face. Elsewhere, the maid Hazel was splashing water violently out of intense regret. She felt unqualified to be a personal maid because she hadn't noticed her little master's fear, and that she was only good at scaring people. The maids admitted to each other that they had worked as mercenaries for a long time, making them lack tact. and Hazel feared Rubian would ask for her replacement. But they remembered how Rubian had defended them even though he was the one who was scared, and realized how kind-hearted he was. They also remembered that he had given the knights an ointment he made himself, sparking their jealousy. Therefore, they resolved to serve this angel-like young master with perfection and never repeat this mistake. In the midst of their thoughts, one of the maids wondered in puzzlement why she automatically thought of girls' clothes. The maids entered the East Room for the first time. It was a room the Duke and Duchess had decorated themselves, and almost no one was allowed to enter, so they began searching for hair accessories. When they found them, they recalled how the Duke and Duchess always felt they would have a girl, so they bought only girls' items, and that if that little lady had lived, she would have been about Rubian's age, and their memories ended with a bitter thought that all this was due to that cursed wizard. It turned out that the reason for the Leviathan family's intense hatred of wizards stemmed from an incident 10 years ago, when a wizard escaped from the Magic Kingdom and the Duchess found him collapsed on the road. It is revealed that the fugitive wizard pleaded pitifully to the Duchess, asking her only for help to cross the valley. Out of pity, the pregnant Duchess allowed him to travel with her. But the moment they reached the depths of the valley, the wizard betrayed her and attacked her brutally. As a result of this treacherous attack, the Duchess was seriously injured and lost the child she was carrying in her womb, and since that tragic incident, the Leviathan family's hatred for wizards was established irrevocably. Back in the present, the maids placed a strawberry-shaped hairpin on Rubian, cooing over his cute appearance that resembled a strawberry fairy, while Rubian looked at his reflection in the mirror, thinking that this pin was for girls, and certain that it had been brought from the East Room. He deduced that these feminine items in a castle full of boys must have been gifts prepared by the Duke and Duchess for their unborn child. Because of this realization, Rubian wondered anxiously if it was really right for him to wear something so precious, and felt confused. At that moment, Leviathan approached him and asked to see it. After examining it, he told him the pin suited him perfectly and that it was his now. Rubian felt warm and resolved in his heart never to let them discover the truth about him being a wizard or the truth about being a girl. Then Leviathan surprised him by asking if he was afraid of scissors. Rubian explained that he wasn't afraid of scissors per se, but was just surprised when a strange woman suddenly put a sharp blade to his neck. As soon as the maids heard this, they collapsed to the floor in intense regret for what they had done to their little master, while Rubian justified to himself that this tension was just a remnant of his days on the battlefield. Leviathan thought about it and suggested they wait until Rubian got used to the palace before cutting his hair, asking him if his long, tangled hair didn't bother him. Rubian admitted it did bother him. Then Leviathan offered to cut his hair himself, reasoning that the fear was because the maid was a stranger, and it would be different with him. Although Rubian trusted Leviathan and his ability to control blades, he knew he completely lacked experience in hairdressing, so he rejected the idea strongly, declaring that an inexperienced person was unqualified to do so, and that his hair wasn't a beast's head to be handled that way. Leviathan didn't care much, thinking the hairstyle didn't matter for a boy anyway, while Rubian thought he would have to cut this old man's hair too if he messed up his. In the end, Rubian surrendered to the idea, hoping the process would succeed under the supervision of the maid Hazel. But Leviathan jokingly announced that he would train her because he was her boss, not the other way around. Thus, the Siebert family hair salon opened, with Leviathan sitting behind Rubian, scissors in hand. But he soon terrified the child when he wondered aloud if his hair was made of cotton candy, and if it would melt in his mouth, causing Rubian to scream to cancel the idea, thinking he had fallen into the hands of a cannibal, not a hairdresser. After a short commotion and the maids trying to guide Leviathan, a small accident occurred. Rubian fell into a deep sleep, and the maids only noticed that he was sleeping peacefully. Rubian woke up shortly after in Leviathan's arms, who told him he had finished cutting his hair and that he should look in the mirror. Rubian was surprised by the result, which was much better than he expected, so Leviathan praised him jokingly. Rubian got excited and told Leviathan he could become a professional hairdresser, but the latter looked at him with a strange look. Then he suddenly pounced on him and bit his head, causing Rubian to scream in pain. Leviathan pulled away, commenting with disappointment that Rubian's hair didn't melt as he expected, which angered Rubian, who screamed at him asking if he really thought his hair was cotton candy. Rubian tried to escape Leviathan's grip, protesting his actions, but Leviathan countered with a nuzzle, asserting he was cute, which infuriated Rubian, who called him a tyrannical old man. Despite his anger, Rubian decided to overlook the matter because Leviathan had done a good job cutting his hair, so he thanked him gratefully. The next day, Boyd was surprised by his brother's new look, wondering in amazement if Rubian was a fairy, which displeased Rubian, who denounced what he was saying. At the dinner table, Rubian noticed Leviathan's absence again, so he wondered if he wouldn't be eating with them today either. One of the maids told him the master of the house had many documents to review. Boyd commented sadly that his father would probably always be busy, while eating his food, noting how delicious it was. Afterward, Rubian excused himself to go to the bathroom, calling for Hazel, who immediately offered to accompany him, while he asked his big brother to continue eating. As they walked down the hallway, Rubian asked Hazel seriously if Leviathan was intentionally avoiding eating with his big brother Boyd, which surprised the maid. Rubian realized in his heart that his suspicion was correct, and although Hazel tried to deny it, insisting her master was always busy, Rubian persisted in asking why he was absent today specifically. Hazel admitted hesitantly that the number of times they had eaten together could be counted on one hand, explaining that the reason wasn't just the master's long absences, but primarily because young Master Boyd was terrified of his father when he was little. As a result of this fear, Boyd suffered from indigestion constantly during meals, which eventually led them to start eating separately, which surprised Rubian, who hadn't imagined his brother's fear of the old man was that great. Hazel added that Leviathan had been extremely short-tempered when the young masters first came to the palace, and at that time Lady Rosetta, who usually mediated between them, was sick and bedridden. Rubian connected the events, realizing that this period must have been when Leviathan lost his child and fell into a pit of despair, causing him to wander for several years. Hazel felt sorry for divulging unnecessary matters, but Rubian thanked her for telling him. Then suddenly, Rubian told the maid he no longer felt like going to the bathroom, and suggested they return to the dining room. Rubian thought it wasn't usually right to interfere in other people's family affairs, but he felt indebted to them, especially after yesterday's incident, and decided to give them a little push. Upon returning to the dining room, Boyd welcomed him. Rubian went straight to him and asked if they should ask the old man to eat with them from now on. Boyd was shocked by this sudden proposal, wondering why he brought up the idea of inviting his father so suddenly. Rubian asked Boyd if he was still afraid, and Boyd denied it in confusion. He explained that he knew his father had gone through something bad before he came, which made him short-tempered for a long time. He added that he now understood his father was avoiding him out of consideration, and that he was no longer afraid of him as he was in the past. But he felt that inviting him suddenly to eat with them now, without any reason, would be a bit embarrassing. Rubian thought for a moment, concluding that Boyd simply needed a catalyst. He then turned to Hazel and asked her to confirm that the master of the house was busy reviewing documents, to which she replied in the affirmative. With a devilish smile, Rubian told his big brother he had a good idea. This struck terror into Boyd, who felt like he was seeing a demon in front of him. Meanwhile, Leviathan was in his office feeling exhausted from the pile of documents, and when there was a knock on the door, he gave permission to enter. But he was surprised to find the visitor was Rubian, wearing a formal suit and glasses, carrying a file, and greeting him with a formal evening salutation. Rubian excused himself for a moment, then hurried closer to the desk, confusing Leviathan, who wondered about the glasses Rubian was wearing. Rubian placed the file on the desk, and Leviathan asked what was inside. Rubian continued to play his role skillfully, asking Leviathan to sign the document to approve it. Leviathan was surprised by this sudden request, and took the document to examine it, finding it full of childish drawings and scribbles. He asked if he had written it, and Rubian answered enthusiastically in the affirmative, clinging to the desk. Rubian explained that they were going to hold a welcome banquet for him in the central dining room, and asked him to check the list of supplies and sign for approval. Leviathan smiled, calling Rubian a funny, chubby puppy, commenting that he was doing his best, then asked if he just had to sign in the designated spot. After he signed, Rubian asked to confirm that he had indeed signed, to which Leviathan replied he could enjoy his party. Then, Rubian revealed his trick, pointing to a small additional note stating that his signature meant his mandatory attendance at the banquet. Leviathan was shocked by this ploy, while Rubian advised him to be more careful before signing next time, then excused himself and left quickly. Rubian found Boyd waiting for him and told him his plan had succeeded, so Boyd jumped for joy. That evening, the dining room was bustling with activity. Servants were working hard everywhere, decorating the hall and preparing the table, excited for this event. While Rubian and Boyd sat together waiting for the party to start, the servants were still wondering why the gardeners were late in bringing more flowers. Rubian felt a little guilty seeing everyone working so earnestly, but he noticed the servants' intense enthusiasm. Boyd explained to him that they hadn't held a party in a long time, so they must be excited for this event. At that moment, the head chef appeared and greeted the two young masters, surprising them. The chef revealed he came to ask Lord Rubian what kind of cake he preferred. Rubian wondered if he should choose something his uncle preferred since it was an important party for him, but Boyd interrupted, explaining it was also a welcome banquet for Rubian. Rubian admitted to Boyd that bringing his father was just an excuse, but Boyd commented that this didn't mean Rubian wasn't an essential part of the celebration. The chef agreed with young Master Boyd and repeated his question to Rubian about what kind of frosting he preferred, but Rubian admitted shyly that he didn't know much about cakes. In his past or present life, he rarely ate cake, so one couldn't have preferences if they hadn't tried anything before. He told the chef he would be happy with anything, so the chef decided to bring a variety so Rubian could discover what he liked, which made Rubian very happy. Then the chef asked if there was any texture he hated or couldn't eat. While Rubian was thinking about the answer, the hall transformed into a wonderful festive place indeed. Suddenly, Leviathan arrived, commenting that he was wondering what kind of trouble they would stir up, but admitted they had done something very nice to his castle. So the two children rushed to him, calling his name. Leviathan commented that the servants must have had a hard time because of them. Then Rubian asked him to come and sit. The two children dragged him to the head of the table, telling him he was the main character today, which surprised Leviathan, who wondered why he was sitting there when Rubian was the guest of honor. Rubian urged Boyd to hurry up and say what he had to say, but Boyd hesitated for a moment. Then he gathered his courage and told his father he was happy he returned safely. He added that he hadn't had the chance to say it before, but he wanted to throw a welcome party for him. He concluded by saying he thanked him for all his hard work and was truly happy he was back safe. Leviathan was touched by his son's sincere words, patted his head gently, and thanked him. But Rubian intervened at the right moment, pushing Boyd toward his father to tell him more, asking if he still had more to say. Boyd gathered his courage again and told his father he wasn't afraid of him anymore, and that he now understood the reason for his behavior in the past. With a final push from Rubian, Boyd finally managed to voice his wish. He asked his father to eat meals together from now on. Rubian intervened again cheerfully, urging Leviathan to agree nicely, reminding him that the war was over and he couldn't run away anymore. Leviathan looked at his son tenderly, wondering to himself when he had grown up like this. Then he went down on one knee in front of him, told him what he did, must have taken great courage, and thanked him for it, while Rubian replied proudly that it was no problem. Boyd revealed that the idea for the party was actually Rubian's, and asked his father to praise him too. Leviathan remembered the document he signed, realizing it was originally for Rubian's welcome banquet, then agreed to Boyd's request. He ordered Boyd to grab Rubian and make him the star of the party, which Boyd executed enthusiastically. While Boyd chased Rubian, who was screaming accusing him of betrayal, everyone was laughing. The head chef interrupted this fun moment, announcing the arrival of the cake and asked them to sit. As the party officially began, Rubian felt strange. His uncle was supposed to be the guest of honor, but the atmosphere was more like a baby's birthday party. Everyone was busy celebrating Rubian, with maids making him more party hats, and Boyd urging him to try everything, making him feel stuffed. Despite everything, Rubian saw that everyone looked happy, so he thought that was what mattered in the end. After a while, sleep overcame him. Leviathan carried him, explaining that he must be tired because he had been running around all day preparing for the party. Leviathan thanked him for what he did for Boyd and for the party, but Rubian, half asleep, muttered that he didn't do anything. Leviathan asked him if he knew where his bedroom was, and told him if he woke up suddenly during the night, he should come to him. Rubian reassured him that he didn't wake up easily once asleep, which relieved Leviathan. Leviathan added that if he felt afraid of the dark or scary thoughts crept in, he should come to him immediately, then bade him good night and wished him a peaceful sleep. After the return celebrations and welcome party ended, Leviathan made sure to spend some time with them at least once a day despite his busy schedule. Especially when he was with Rubian, he always made sure to include snack time. Rubian protested the massive amount of sweets, wondering why Leviathan bothered the chef to prepare all this. But Leviathan explained that the chef was the one who got excited and made them himself. He then told him he should eat a lot of everything. Then he asked him to give him a bite of the cake. So Rubian noticed that Leviathan secretly loved sweets. Rubian jokingly wondered if Leviathan worked here instead of his office just to make him serve him snacks, to which Leviathan admitted he had been found out. But Rubian took the piece of cake, declaring it would be confiscated due to his rudeness and that he would eat it himself. While Rubian tasted another piece, Leviathan asked if it was good, confirming he said he liked strawberry flavor, to which Rubian replied it was delicious, delighting Leviathan, who thought the chef would be happy his hard work perfecting strawberry cream had paid off. Leviathan suggested to Rubian that they go to the annex together after finishing their snacks, which confused Rubian. Leviathan explained that the old man had been suspiciously quiet, so he decided to take the initiative to visit him, and Rubian realized he meant Lord Siebert. Rubian remembered that Lord Siebert, Leviathan's grandfather, rarely appeared in the original story due to ill health, and because he wasn't a main character, he had completely forgotten him and didn't feel anxious about meeting him. But suddenly the place shook violently. Rubian wondered in panic about the source of the noise and if it was a monster attack. But Leviathan reassured him and asked him to finish his cake first, confirming that the visitor would arrive soon. At that moment, a huge man burst through the door shouting, asking where the new rascal was. The door slammed back, so the old man wondered if this was an attack. But the old man had done nothing but destroy what remained of the door with a single blow. Rubian was astonished by this sight. The grandfather was supposed to be bedridden, but here he was standing before him armed. So Leviathan scolded him for smashing doors again and scaring the child. The old man shouted angrily, ignoring Leviathan's words, and ordered the new child to be brought immediately. Leviathan pointed calmly to Rubian, explaining he was standing right in front of him. The old man bent down and stared at Rubian with a terrifying look, causing Rubian to give a confused greeting. The grandfather shouted, disapproving of Rubian's small size, but Rubian intervened, explaining he wasn't snot, to which the grandfather replied sarcastically that he was talking snot. Rubian tried to defend himself, saying his name was Rubian, not Snot, while secretly fearing this angry man would crush him like he did the door. The grandfather ordered him to come closer immediately. Rubian let out a cry of fear as he saw the grandfather lifting his massive axe near him, but all the grandfather did was measure Rubian's height with his axe, commenting that he barely exceeded a low-grade monster, surprising Rubian, who wondered if he was being measured by monster standards. Leviathan intervened, trying to calm his father, but the latter exploded in anger, scolding his son for bringing a child instead of someone useful. He asked sarcastically if he expected this little snot to wield a sword, and ordered him to be sent back to the capital immediately. Leviathan asked his father to lower his voice because he was scaring the child, pointing out that the monster subjugation campaign was about to begin, but the grandfather continued to grumble in an unintelligible voice. So Leviathan advised him not to mumble like that so no one could understand him. While Rubian hid behind Leviathan, he wondered anxiously if he would really be kicked out. He had heard the other siblings were accepted without issue, so he thought he would be accepted too. The grandfather interrupted him, shouting at him not to stare at him like that, and that his appearance looked so fragile he might break if he bumped into something. Leviathan intervened firmly, assuring his father it wasn't his place to decide Rubian's future, and that treating him like a soldier was absolutely unacceptable. The grandfather exploded in anger, denying he treated him like a soldier, explaining he blamed Leviathan for failing to bring someone worthwhile, as it is known that no sane person comes to the north unless obsessed with battles. Yet he brought a doll-like child. In the midst of this argument, Rubian screamed, asking them to stop fighting because of him. He begged them not to kick him out, asserting he had nowhere else to go, and that he would rather die than return. Then he promised he would eat a lot and grow quickly, and that he wouldn't break even if he bumped into things. Rubian confirmed tearfully that he wasn't as weak as he looked, and begged not to be sent away. He tried to show his strength to Leviathan, who was holding him, assuring him he would be surprised if he saw him at full power. Leviathan intervened angrily, asking how his father could scare a child like this and drive him to say such things. Then he decided to take Rubian to rest and drink hot chocolate, which the grandfather considered disrespectful talk toward his father. Rubian felt worried that their leaving like this meant he would really be kicked out. He realized that what he had to do now was prove his worth. Rubian is determined to stay regardless of what the old lord says. Rubian clung to Leviathan and declared he would live here no matter what. He stated he didn't want to be separated from his uncle. Leviathan couldn't help but laugh at this scene. The grandfather commented sarcastically that his son had picked up something very annoying. Rubian wondered why Leviathan was laughing. Elsewhere, in what seemed like a formal job interview for the Siebert family, the grandfather asked Rubian seriously if he really wanted to stay in their house that much. Rubian answered with intense enthusiasm in the affirmative. At that, the grandfather asked him to prove his worth, whether it was stamina or combat prowess. Rubian thought his true ability lay in being a mage, but he quickly changed his mind and said his greatest strength was mental resilience, which the grandfather agreed was essential. The grandfather ordered Rubian to prove his mental resilience now by finishing his snack, asserting he wasn't a heartless old man. He explained he wouldn't kick him out while he was still eating. Rather, he would test him and kick him out after he finished his food, then dashed off. Rubian realized he would be kicked out either way. The grandfather smashed the table with his fist, terrifying Rubian, who could only take one bite of his cake. Rubian wondered if this was the Siebert mental test, to see if he would be affected by the past. But the grandfather ordered a servant to bring all the cake in the castle immediately, which relieved Rubian. Leviathan offered a piece of cake to Rubian to eat while waiting for the rest, telling him he had to go check a report about monster traces near the northern outpost. In a whisper, Leviathan advised him to cling to that stubborn old man just as he had done with him earlier. Then he left, leaving Rubian wondering what kind of advice this was and how he would manage on his own. The grandfather tried to scare him, reminding him that monsters appear often in these parts, and that a rabbit like him would be nothing more than a snack, making Rubian wonder if the grandfather thought he was afraid of magical beasts. So Rubian decided to play his role, admitting he was a little scared and asking him to let him stay. Then he used his first attack, innocent puppy eyes. When the puppy look didn't work, Rubian switched to his second attack, the silent stare, wondering to himself if his plan would fail. But the grandfather suddenly gave in, declaring that if Rubian was that scared, he should stay, asserting that he wasn't the type to kick out a child trembling with fear. Rubian seized this opportunity to seal the deal with his third attack, clinging to the grandfather and telling him the outside world was too scary, so he wanted to stay here with him. With the grandfather's face flushing with emotion, Rubian's attack succeeded completely. Rubian felt relieved, realizing he wouldn't be kicked out anytime soon. The grandfather held Rubian, wondering how soft he and his words were, doubting if he was really a boy, then criticized his clothes that resembled a potato sack. One of the maids intervened, explaining that the tailor was traveling and they had arranged to take his measurements in 3 days, which annoyed the grandfather, who denounced that this little snot had to live in a potato sack for 3 whole days. While Rubian muttered that he wasn't snot or a potato sack, the grandfather announced that his new weapon would be ready anyway, and that they would go out to buy new clothes tomorrow. But Rubian accused him of planning to abandon him as soon as they got there. The grandfather realized the child had uncovered his plan, so Rubian flew into a rage, asking if the grandfather wanted to kick him out that badly. In the midst of his anger, he suddenly heard a voice calling his name. It was Khaled communicating with him. The grandfather interrupted his thoughts, asking where the snot was. So Rubian told him he desperately needed to go to the bathroom and dashed off. The grandfather was surprised by his sudden departure to the bathroom like that. The maids noticed that Rubian didn't go to the bathroom, but to his room, and wondered if he had left because he was upset. One of the maids confronted the grandfather, reminding him that little Master Rubian begged him to stay, yet he kept trying to kick him out. The maid explained to the grandfather that children in the north start their lives as night attendants at a young age, undergoing strict training to become knights defending the north. She thought Leviathan brought a child for the same purpose, but denounced bringing a child so young and soft. The grandfather justified his stance by saying he tried to send him back before any bad memories were formed, realizing that a scary grandfather trying to kick him out was in itself a bad memory. He tried to convince himself that what he did was for the best, and that a child like Rubian wasn't suitable for the north anyway, but admitted he was cute. The grandfather burst out admitting he was so cute he almost bit him. The maid told him he might not have realized it yet, but Master Rubian wasn't just cute, he was brave too. He had stood up to him moments ago. She reminded him that even Boyd and William used to cry and avoid him until recently, while Rubian didn't cry or run away. But she warned him that he might start avoiding him from now on, because he seemed upset enough to leave the room, and hadn't even managed to eat his cake. In his room, Rubian heard Khaled's voice again, assuring him that King Arkan had realized he was still alive, and that the king knows he is hiding within the Babylon Empire, and has sent chasers to the continent. Rubian felt panicked, while Khaled's voice continued calling him. Khaled tried to calm Rubian, assuring him that he was coming to him too. Rubian sat on the floor scared, admitting he didn't want to be dragged back to the kingdom. Khaled asked if he was staying with Duke Siebert now, and advised him to stay close to him because he was skilled, which surprised Rubian, who wondered how he knew his location, to which Khaled replied that there was a way to know everything. Khaled grumbled that this wouldn't have happened if Rubian hadn't abandoned him in the first place, but Rubian asked him not to be angry, explaining that he was extremely worried right now. Khaled denied being angry, assuring Rubian that he could never be angry with him. Khaled reassured him not to worry too much, explaining that the land of Bamlin was void of mana, so the chasers wouldn't be able to do much, which Rubian agreed with as he was suffering from this himself. Khaled promised he would be by his side soon, so Rubian thanked him for his support. After the conversation ended, Rubian resolved not to sit idly by, but to prepare. His first task was to find out why his uncle died, and the most likely theory was monsters. As in the north, monsters were the only potential enemy, and the original story didn't make sense anyway. The second task was to determine the time of his uncle's death. In the original novel, Boyd reconciled with his uncle when he was 12, meaning his uncle should be safe for at least a year. Although these were all just guesses, Rubian decided to do what he could. He began using his magic, summoning Wysaria. It was a sea where countless magic formulas intertwined. This sea was called the Wisdom of the World, the Truth, the System, or Wysaria's Blessing, and it taught him every magic circle in existence. Thanks to that, Rubian was able to live as a mage despite possessing little innate mana. When he communicated with Wysaria, she asked him if he needed help, so she showed him what he needed. With Wysaria's help, Rubian obtained a small star that would enable him to protect his uncle. After that, Rubian rushed to Boyd, who was writing in his diary, and asked him for the map's location, startling Boyd. Rubian wondered if Boyd was writing in his diary. Rubian tried to see if Boyd had written about him, but Boyd denied it vehemently. Boyd gave up and told him the map should be on the bookshelf, and went to get it. While getting the map, Boyd asked Rubian if he was okay after meeting their grandfather, to which Rubian replied he was cool. Boyd commented that he probably already knew that from experience, but advised him to be careful. He recounted how their grandfather took him and William to the northern mountains in the middle of the night to train them, and advised him to run immediately if he felt anything strange tomorrow. That night, Rubian lay in bed thinking about Boyd's warnings. Suddenly, Leviathan entered the room, asking Rubian why he was awake, so Rubian asked if he was working again. Leviathan denied it, explaining he was just checking on him, and that Boyd's room smelled bad, so he was doing his rounds on the children's rooms. Then he asked about his stomach condition, as he heard he had suddenly run to the bathroom. Rubian reassured him he was perfectly fine and hadn't been sick in the first place. Leviathan asked if his father had bothered him, causing his stomach ache, but Rubian denied it, insisting he really needed to go to the bathroom. Rubian wondered if the old lord hated him, and Leviathan thought he might have to remove the corridor leading to the northern annex, which panicked Rubian, who begged him not to do that. Rubian asked anxiously if Leviathan would kick him out if the old lord kept telling him to leave. Leviathan denied it categorically, promising that no one could force him to do something he didn't want. Leviathan told Rubian he could do whatever he wished, and if he wanted to stay, he should stay. Rubian felt a strange feeling. He didn't mind being used by others, but he felt something strange when Leviathan told him that, and felt like he was about to sneeze. He felt a tickle in his heart whenever his uncle treated him kindly, and every time that rude, harsh uncle looked at him as if he were something precious. He was thinking about the day his lies would be exposed. And when that happened, he feared this kindness would disappear too. While Rubian was immersed in these thoughts, Leviathan watched him tossing in his sleep. Leviathan sighed, realizing Rubian was constantly anxious and afraid he would leave him. Suddenly, Rubian started muttering unintelligible words in his sleep, looking in pain. Leviathan tried to wake him, but Rubian muttered that he didn't want to, making Leviathan wonder what was tormenting him so much. He held him in his arms and asked him to tell him what hurt. In his nightmare, Rubian saw King Arkan, who was calling him his beloved seventh child. The king was pained to see Rubian injured like this after fighting for him. He ordered him to be careful when catching the warlock and to ensure he was brought back alive, because that was why they went to war. He warned him strictly not to let the scum of the continent take him, especially Duke Siebert. Rubian remembered he disobeyed orders, but because of that, he was able to defeat his father. Then he kicked King Arkan away. The king screamed his name at the end of the nightmare. Rubian woke up the next morning feeling refreshed, declaring he had slept deeply, but he was surprised to find something strange in his bed, wondering what this extremely comfortable bedding was. It was Boyd sleeping in his bed, so Rubian asked why he was there, and Boyd answered he came to play cards. Rubian was surprised he came early in the morning to play cards, but Boyd told him he was leaving without playing. Boyd grumbled to himself that he should have gone to the bathroom at dawn, wondering why he came here. Rubian was surprised by Boyd leaving like that. Then he found his uncle sitting on the sofa, asking if he was playing cards in the morning too, to which Leviathan replied he just liked the sofa. Rubian asked him sarcastically if he liked the sofa so much he slept on it, and Leviathan answered that sleep had overcome him. Then he asked Rubian to pretend he hadn't seen anything strange today. After he left, Rubian called the butler and gave him an order. Rubian wondered if he should pretend not to know the old duke, but the butler told him not to worry about it because His Excellency was punishing himself. The butler explained that the duke was punishing himself because he had been harsh with Lord Rubian and heard he left the room because of him, which surprised Rubian, who confirmed he only left because of a stomachache. The butler praised Lord Rubian's kind heart, but Rubian denied it, then asked anxiously if the old duke wouldn't go with him today. As soon as Rubian expressed his anticipation to go together, the grandfather suddenly appeared apologizing. Rubian was surprised by the grandfather's apology, who seemed angry at the same time. Rubian wondered what this contradiction meant, and if it was some kind of test too. The grandfather was confused and tried to explain that his words had betrayed him. Rubian was happy to see an adult this flustered for the first time. Rubian explained he was just a little surprised and not angry, so the grandfather asked if he didn't hate him. Rubian denounced this question, so the grandfather wondered how one could not love a little snot like Rubian. The grandfather hugged Rubian enthusiastically, wondering where they got this cute thing, while Rubian screamed annoyed by his rough beard. The grandfather noticed the strawberry pin in Rubian's sack-like clothes, wondering when he got these cute things. He asked the butler if Leviathan had given him the key to the East Room, and the butler confirmed it. Then the grandfather prepared to leave, asking Rubian if he couldn't ride in a covered carriage, to which he replied affirmatively. Rubian had always imagined that visiting the Northern Siebert Duchy would be a harsh and scary experience. But he was surprised by the warm welcome the grandfather received from the townspeople, where children ran towards him to show off their fencing skills, and merchants insisted on giving him their best, making him ask them to stop giving him things. Rubian realized the grandfather was nothing but a beloved grandfather to everyone. The grandfather ordered everything they received to be put in the carriage, then urged Rubian to hurry and escape before they got stuck there forever. Rubian remembered it was similar when they first arrived in Zelox, realizing everyone truly loved the ducal family. They finally arrived at Evelyn's boutique, where an employee told them Madame Evelyn wouldn't return for a few days. The grandfather decided to dress Rubian in ready-made clothes that fit him for now. One of the employees approached him kindly and asked him as a cute young lady what kind of clothes he liked. Rubian screamed, explaining he was a boy. The employees apologized immediately, explaining he looked exactly like a young lady. So the grandfather commented jokingly that the reason was his small size. He then urged him to eat lots of food to grow, which annoyed Rubian, who asked him to stop teasing him. Rubian was surprised for a moment, thinking his secret had been revealed. But the employees were surprised by his reaction, and they wondered amongst themselves why they thought dresses would fit him well even though they knew he was a young master. Thus began Rubian's tour of the Siebert territory. He was reminded that the Siebert estate was full of demonic beasts. Because of the demonic beasts in the Siebert lands, they ended up creating two famous local specialties, the first being weapon manufacturing. This region produces exceptional metals known throughout the continent, naturally attracting skilled artisans from everywhere. Then the Great War that swept the continent led to an unexpected boom in this business, and this place became where all those weapons were made. Rubian and the grandfather arrived at the smithy, where the grandfather introduced Rubian to the owner, Madkus. Rubian noticed Madkus's massive size, matching the old lord's, looking more like a knight than a blacksmith. So Madkus asked jokingly if he had a child late in life. The grandfather scolded him for smoking in front of a child and ordered him to put out his pipe, so Madkus apologized. As an apology, he offered Rubian to try smithing himself. He suggested he start by pouring molten iron or sorting leftover scrap, which angered the grandfather, who denounced assigning a child such tasks. but Madcus thought this was the most fun age for such things. So Rubian laughed, while the grandfather demanded he stop chattering and hand over the sword. The grandfather noted that this man was weirder than expected, and watching him might take some time, but wondered what to do since the workshop was too dangerous for a small child. Rubian suggested he would go look elsewhere and return, assuring the grandfather he would be fine, as this was a perfect opportunity for him. The grandfather warned him there were knights outside and he should stay close to them and not go with anyone offering strawberry milk. Then Rubian promised he would return soon. Meanwhile, the grandfather was examining the new sword with Madcus, wondering why a certain material was used for the hilt instead of Aperon, but Madcus told him not to complain before taking a close look. Outside, Rubian called out to Sir Leon, who reminded him to address him as Senior. Sir Leon asked Rubian why he hadn't visited the Night Squad even once, but quickly changed his mind. Then he asked if there was a place he wanted to go, and Rubian answered enthusiastically in the affirmative. Rubian led him directly to the magic stone shop he had previously located using Boyd's map. The second specialty of the Siebert territory was magic stones. These stones are extracted from magic veins or obtained by defeating demonic beasts, with higher quality stones coming from stronger monsters. When processed, magic stones can be turned into magic tools. And since monster subjugation campaigns happen often in Siebert, many high-quality magic stones are found there. The Magic Kingdom imports those stones, processes them into magic tools, then sells them back to the continent at a huge profit. While Sir Leon was examining a violet stone, commenting on its beautiful color and weight, he wondered if Rubian wanted this useless thing, but Rubian insisted he liked it, so Sir Leon gave it to him. Rubian knew the Magic Kingdom kept the methods of using magic stones secret, so they were treated here as simple ornaments. But he knew pale purple stones were barrier stones. In his country, he was the only one who knew how to form barriers using magic stones, for the Magic Kingdom itself was protected by an ancient magic tool barrier lost to time, maintaining its reputation as the thousand-year fortress that never fell. And Rubian knew the ancient magic circles needed to create those magic tools, so he decided he would buy a huge amount of magic stones, make magic tools, and place protective magic all over Zelox. But he soon faced a problem. He didn't have any money. At that moment, the grandfather appeared, shocked to hear his child had no money. Sir Leon was surprised the Duke hadn't given Rubian any allowance. The grandfather and Sir Leon intervened enthusiastically, asking Rubian to tell them what he wanted, to the point Sir Leon considered it an order from his supreme commander. Rubian felt embarrassed by this sudden attention. Leviathan interrupted the commotion with his arrival, commenting that their voices were audible from outside, so the grandfather seized the opportunity. The grandfather told Leviathan he hadn't given the child a proper allowance, making him sulk because he couldn't buy what he wanted. Rubian denied angrily that he was sulking. Leviathan approached him gently and asked if there was something he wanted. Rubian admitted hesitantly there was something he wanted, but he didn't need it immediately. The three men were excited to know what he wanted. Rubian pointed to the displayed collection of magic stones, saying he wanted everything from here to there. Rubian felt shy about his exaggerated request, suggesting he settle for just 5 stones. But Leviathan ordered Leon to bring the shop owner, while the grandfather announced he would buy the entire shop, and that he didn't buy cheap things, so he asked him to set a high price. After the deal was done, Rubian received the shop's title deed, and Leviathan ordered only the purple magic stones to be sent to the castle, ensuring they were checked carefully for any negative energy, then wrapped in strawberry-shaped paper so a child could open them easily. The grandfather asked Rubian if that was all he wanted, commenting on the modesty of his wishes, making Rubian wonder to himself in amazement if he had really bought a whole shop. While the grandfather was asking if there was anywhere else he'd like to visit, Rubian felt danger approaching. A rampaging horse was running towards them. In a flash, the grandfather jumped and grabbed Rubian, saving him from the accident. But the grandfather fell to the ground in pain. The horse owner apologized profusely, explaining his horse had been stung by a bee and went berserk, while Leviathan advised him to be more careful. Leviathan reassured Rubian, who looked shocked, but Rubian confirmed he was fine thanks to the old lord saving him. Then he asked anxiously if the grandfather was very angry because he went back immediately after the accident, but Leviathan reassured him he wasn't angry with him. On the way back, the grandfather was cursing his frail body, not even meeting Rubian's gaze. Upon returning to the palace, Rubian felt satisfied with his successful shopping. Hazel asked him if he bought everything he needed, and he replied he wandered around too. While Hazel was examining his purchases, she found a pile of magic stones and herbs that grew even in winter, which Rubian told her they could plant in the garden when the weather got warm. Rubian wondered if that man had spent too much money today, but Hazel was sure that wasn't the case. Then she asked if these were the only clothes he bought, and he answered they would place another order once Madame Evelyn returned. Rubian remembered that was exactly what the grandfather said, then asked Hazel to cut him a piece of cloth. Hazel took out a dagger, explaining there were pictures of how to cut, which terrified Rubian, who found the scene very scary. In the old Duke's room, the butler asked if he should burn more painkillers, but the Duke refused, saying they didn't work well anyway. Instead, he was interested in knowing if the nose candy and the allowance bag were packed correctly. The butler confirmed he filled the bag with jewelry and delivered it as ordered. Rubian recalls how surprised he was by the amount of jewelry, but insisted on carrying it himself despite its weight, thinking of buying more shops. In his room, the old Duke was in pain, so the butler urged him to stop being stubborn and let the doctor examine him, but the Duke insisted he wasn't in pain. The butler reminded him he lost his balance and fell today, so the Duke kicked him out angrily. After the butler left, the Duke grumbled about his frail body that couldn't even protect a bit of soft hair properly. The butler thought to himself with regret and apologized before leaving. It is revealed that Balrog Siebert, known as the Mad Lion of the North, was a knight stronger than anyone else, and his mere appearance on the battlefield was enough to crush the enemy's morale. But he suffered a serious injury in a battle that led to his leg being disabled. Pain would attack his body suddenly without warning, and although he never showed it, the frequency of the pain increased over time. When the war against demonic beasts broke out, Balrog Siebert couldn't participate due to his injury, leaving a deep scar on the pride of the Northern Knights. Since then, he began to isolate himself more and more, and his temper became sharper. Meanwhile, Rubian asked the butler to see the old lord. He found him asleep, surprising the Duke, who was awake, that the butler ignored his orders to leave. Rubian asked the butler to be quiet so as not to wake him, pointing to the sleeping grandfather. The butler told him that at this stage he probably wouldn't wake up even if carried away, confusing the Duke. Rubian presented a cloth with ointment on it, explaining it would feel cool and nice when applied, and that he made it from the herbs he bought today. While applying it, he asked the butler to confirm his previous lie that his parents were healers. Thus, Rubian had to lie again. The butler asked Rubian if he knew His Excellency's knee was in bad condition, and he answered yes. So he asked how he knew. Rubian explained he noticed it from his steps. He was dragging his leg a little, and the sound of his heel was different. Even earlier in the city, when he dodged the horse, he stumbled to the right. So Rubian thought his leg might be hurting, but pretended not to notice because the grandfather was trying to endure, but realized his continued endurance would only increase the pain. The butler realized that was why Rubian made the ointment, wondering where someone like him came from. Suddenly, Rubian felt intense heat in the Duke's knee, and wondered if it was because of the ointment, but Rubian reassured him he would be fine. The butler noticed His Excellency's lips were trembling. He remembered he had served him for decades and only saw him cry twice. Once when the lady of the house died, and the other when his granddaughter was stillborn. While the entire family was falling apart due to the baby girl's death, demonic beasts invaded their lands. His Excellency tried to go to war instead of his despairing son, but his body didn't obey him, and in the end, he couldn't go. And since then, the phrase frail body became a habit of his. Rubian was thinking he made a large bandage, but it was still insufficient, and wondered if he could grow that big one day. Then he would become stronger. The butler interrupted him, assuring him he was more than enough as he was. Then he suggested they leave so His Excellency could rest, and offered to escort him to his room, which Rubian agreed to, while the butler thought that at least the third time wasn't tears of sadness. Elsewhere, King Arkan was pained by parting with his seventh child again. His child had left his embrace once more, but he thanked the Lord that the child possessed a physical body this time. For a physical body always leaves traces, so he ordered more tracking mages sent across the continent to search every region thoroughly, regardless of age or gender. He emphasized that he must retrieve that child no matter what, for in order to summon the Great Black Mage again, that child was absolutely essential. The king remembered he was a great mage who inherited Wiseria's wisdom, and the jewel he had seized. Meanwhile, Rubian was using magic stones to enable him to activate the barrier stone's power. Rubian sighed tiredly, wondering how long it would take to activate just one barrier stone. While he was grumbling that he would never finish, a voice calling him interrupted him. The grandfather had made eating meals together a routine now, and Boyd always ran away, claiming he would skip dessert. The grandfather was playing with Rubian while urging him to eat, but Rubian complained he couldn't eat this way. Rubian threatened to leave if the grandfather continued to tease him, but the grandfather explained he only asked him to check his knee after taking a small bribe. Then he asked if he would do that tickling for him again. Rubian screamed, refusing, as he was only trying to hide his healing spell. The grandfather pretended his knee hurt again and asked the genius pharmacist to take a look. So Rubian shouted at his grandfather, asking him to return his bandage if he kept messing with him. The grandfather scolded him jokingly for calling him grandfather instead of grandpa, so Rubian agreed to stop teasing him. Leviathan intervened, asking his father to stop teasing the child, explaining he had been treated properly. The grandfather defended himself, saying he found the two children cute and that his knee had been in perfect condition since he used the little rascal's medicine. Leviathan told him if he got better thanks to Rubian, he shouldn't tease him, and Rubian insisted he shouldn't use beard attacks either, so the grandfather agreed reluctantly and asked Rubian to call him Grandpa. Then the grandfather asked Leviathan to step out for a moment, and asked if that little one had been granted the Siebert territory yet, to which Leviathan replied the adoption hadn't been finalized yet. The grandfather was shocked by Leviathan's words. He collapsed to his knees, muttering words about his precious little rascal, so Leviathan told him adoption wasn't easy, and Rubian's wishes were paramount. The grandfather wondered sadly if that little one wouldn't stay permanently, and felt bad just thinking about his disappearance. Leviathan reminded him he had told him that beforehand, and accused him of reading the letter in a hurry again, and reminded him he was trying to kick him out at first. The grandfather denied he was desperate to kick him out at first. Then he announced dramatically that just seeing that child breathe removed 10 years of accumulated frustration, wondering how he was supposed to live without him now. But Leviathan reminded him he didn't have any accumulated frustration to begin with, so the grandfather screamed that it was just an expression. The grandfather reminded Leviathan that Rose would return in 2 weeks and he should talk to her properly and explain things well to Rubian too, then warned him sternly not to let that child go, which the grandfather refused categorically. Leviathan explained this wasn't something he could decide alone. A few days later, Rubian finally finished his work on the magic stones. He was happy he managed to accomplish it in secret, thanks to everyone being busy, Hazel with estate work, the grandfather designing new weapons, Boyd with sword training, and Sir Leviathan always. He had plenty of time alone, so he managed to finish his work. He knew using magic stones alone would still create a barrier effect, but it wouldn't be effective. It was like cooking. Ingredients could be eaten as is, but cooking them made them taste better. And likewise, converting them into magic tools enhanced their effect significantly. And if he could link the ambient mana in Zelox with the barrier stone's own mana, the barrier would last almost permanently without needing a constant mana supply. He wanted a strong shield that could protect this place for a long time, a shield that detected intruders and stopped them, even temporarily. The stones and magic circles were ready, but the real problem was determining where to place the magic stones. He needed to surround Zelox with them, and it was better to check the locations personally, so he decided to patrol around the castle for a while under a secret pretext. But he was worried the knights might find his actions suspicious, and one might wonder if he was a spy to be detained, making Rubian fear being mistaken for an intruder. At that moment, Leviathan called him from inside the room, so Rubian jumped off the chair, surprised. Leviathan announced he was coming in, so Rubian tried to stop him, realizing his eyes must be red now due to magic use, and he needed to change them, quickly. Leviathan asked what he was doing with the door closed, then noticed his eyes were red. Rubian felt panicked, thinking his cover was blown, but Leviathan held his face and asked what he was focusing on so much that his eyes became bloodshot. Rubian claimed the book was so interesting he stayed up reading. Thanking God secretly, he managed to change his eye color in time. Leviathan advised him not to strain himself like that, and suggested he go out for a walk instead of staying in his room, which surprised Rubian, who thought Leviathan was busy. Rubian asked Leviathan what he was doing here anyway, so Leviathan wondered if he needed a reason to see him. Rubian denied it. Then Leviathan asked him to get his coat and wrapped another scarf around him. Rubian was surprised by Leviathan's reaction, which seemed like he was sulking. As they walked in the snow, Rubian commented cheerfully on the beautiful weather. But Leviathan warned him to watch his step so he wouldn't trip. Then he asked about the book he was reading so intently, so Rubian told him he borrowed it from the library. And Leviathan asked if he liked studying. Leviathan thought he should get him a private tutor. Then he asked if there was anything else he wanted to do besides studying. Rubian announced enthusiastically there was something he wanted, which was to take fencing lessons. So Leviathan asked if he wanted to become strong too. Rubian answers he wants to become stronger because he has become a northern man. Rubian thought if he became a knight, it wouldn't be strange to wander around. And since Boyd was patrolling the walls with the Night Squad, he would be able to determine the barrier stone locations naturally too. Leviathan agreed to his request and told him if he needed other studies, he should tell him, which delighted Rubian, who confirmed he loved learning. Leviathan started talking about Rubian staying, but stopped suddenly. Then he told him it was nothing, and he had to find a teacher first. And when Rubian asked if he could take lessons with Boyd, Leviathan explained that might be difficult for him, for Boyd was already at the top level of the elementary academy. Rubian suggested taking fencing lessons from his knight uncles, which Leviathan found a reasonable idea since they didn't seem like they would leave him alone. Leviathan told him since he had made his decision, he had to be ready. Rubian remembered whenever he went to hang out at the Night Squad, the healthy knights welcomed him warmly. They invited him to visit often and commented on his small size, thinking he would be perfect as their youngest member. Rubian felt exhausted just by their gazes. Then he asked Leviathan if anyone had joined the Night Squad recently, to which he replied Boyd was the last to join a few years ago, meaning there hadn't been a rookie for years. Rubian realized being the youngest in an already tough Night Squad, after several years, would be a hard road. He tried to back out of his decision, but Leviathan reminded him a man doesn't go back on his word, so Rubian felt doomed. At the training ground, the knights were waiting for this moment impatiently, and welcomed him enthusiastically as their youngest member. Rubian felt exhausted by this enthusiasm. One knight said he felt his blood boiling, and he would make Rubian a brave man of the north. The deputy commander of the Siebert Knights, Oberon, introduced himself, explaining this place relied strictly on merit, so they didn't use honorific titles within the squad. Rubian gave a military salute declaring no complaints. Oberon commented on his cuteness wearing the uniform, then announced the start of basic training. The first task was to do 2 laps around the training ground, but of course it was the children's version, so Rubian started running in a small circle. The training continued with Oberon announcing the next step, swinging a wooden sword, but a small sword because it was still dangerous. Rubian started swinging his small swords, enthusiastically mimicking a horse's neigh. Then Oberon explained horsemanship was also essential for a knight, and ordered a passing knight to become a horse for the youngest. Thus, Rubian began horsemanship training on another knight's back. Rubian wondered to himself what was happening, while other knights took turns giving him a ride. Rubian felt this wasn't training, just playing with a little nephew. But in the end, he was told he did a good job and they would patrol the city walls tomorrow. Rubian was excited about this opportunity that came sooner than expected, so Oberon praised his good attitude and willingness to try everything, confirming the commander would love that. When Rubian asked about the commander, Oberon explained he meant His Excellency the Duke, and that as the proud Siebert Knight Squad, they must always train and maintain their dignity so as not to bring shame to their master. But Rubian wondered jokingly what if the commander was the one bringing shame instead. Rubian pointed to Leviathan, who had been sleeping on the ground since earlier, explaining that this was their commander.